Have you ever noticed that your symptoms get worse when you're under emotional stress? That a difficult conversation can trigger a flare? That anxiety seems to live somewhere in your chest or in your gut? That grief feels like a physical weight, not just a metaphor, but an actual sensation in the body? Most of us have been taught to treat physical symptoms as physical problems, and emotional pain as a separate category entirely. Something for the mind to work through while the body's issues are handled elsewhere. But that separation is not how the body actually works. The nervous system does not have a wall between emotional experience and physical function. What we feel emotionally is registered, processed, and stored physically. And when emotional pain goes unresolved, when fear, grief, shame, or the residue of trauma has nowhere to go, it doesn't simply disappear. It goes into the body. Welcome back. I'm Madeleine Lowry, a neural retraining specialist. We're continuing our series on trauma, the nervous system, and chronic illness. In our last episode, we established what trauma actually is, not just the dramatic, obvious events, but the full range of experiences that overwhelm the nervous system's capacity to process and integrate. And we looked at the research connecting early life adversity to adult health outcomes. Today, we're going deeper into the mechanism, the specific pathway through which unresolved emotional pain becomes physical symptoms. This is one of the most important episodes in this series, because understanding this pathway changes not just how we think about chronic illness, but what we understand to be possible with healing. Let's start with something fundamental. The nervous system is a single, integrated system, not a mind over here and a body over there. One system. And that system processes emotional experience using many of the same structures and pathways it uses to process physical experience. When you feel afraid, your heart rate increases, your muscles tighten, your breathing becomes shallow. That is not a metaphor for fear. That is fear in the body. When you feel grief, there is often a genuine physical heaviness, a tightness in the throat, a sensation in the chest, an exhaustion that sleep doesn't seem to touch. These are not imaginary symptoms. They are the body's real, measurable response to the emotional state the nervous system is in. Now, when those emotional states are temporary, the body processes them and returns to balance. We feel afraid, the threat passes, the body settles. We grieve, the grief moves through, the body recovers. But when emotional pain is unresolved, when it has been suppressed, buried, or simply never processed, the body doesn't get that signal to settle. It stays in the emotional and physiological state associated with the unresolved experience. Quietly, persistently, often for years. Let's focus specifically on fear, because it is one of the most physiologically costly of all unresolved emotional states. Fear is the nervous system signal that something threatening is present, and the body's response to fear is immediate and comprehensive. The stress hormones cortisol and adrenaline are released. Heart rate and blood pressure increase. Muscles mobilize for action. Digestion slows or stops. The immune system shifts into an inflammatory posture. Energy is diverted away from repair and recovery and toward immediate survival. In an acute situation, a car swerving in front of you, a sudden loud noise, this response is exactly what is needed. It lasts for moments and then the body recovers. But when fear is connected to unresolved trauma, it doesn't behave like acute fear. It becomes chronic background fear, a persistent low-level activation that the person may not even consciously recognize as fear. It may feel like a constant state of tension, a sense of bracing for something, an inability to fully relax even in safe circumstances, a body that never quite settles. And that body, running a fear response in the background day after day, is under an enormous and sustained physiological load. The immune system stays in its inflammatory posture. Digestion remains compromised. Sleep is lighter and less restorative. Hormone balance drifts. The autonomic nervous system loses its natural flexibility. These are not physiological symptoms. They are the direct physical consequences of a nervous system that has never received the signal that the fear is over. Now let's talk about something even more specific, the relationship between emotional pain and physical pain. Research in neuroscience has established something remarkable. Emotional pain and physical pain are processed by overlapping regions of the brain. The same neural circuitry that registers a broken bone also registers rejection, grief, shame, and loss. That is not a coincidence. It reflects the nervous system's fundamental integration of social and physical experience. For our ancestors, social pain, rejection from the group, loss of connection, was genuinely life-threatening. And so the nervous system learned to treat it with the same urgency as physical injury. This has a profound implication for understanding chronic pain. When unresolved emotional pain is stored in the nervous system, when grief, fear, shame, or the residue of trauma has been suppressed or never fully processed, it can eventually emerge as physical pain. Not because the person is making it up, not because it is psychosomatic in the dismissive sense of that word, but because the nervous system is expressing through the body what has had no other place to go. Chronic pain conditions in particular frequently have this quality. The pain is real, the suffering is real, but beneath the physical symptom there is often an emotional layer that has never been addressed. And when that emotional layer is addressed, when the stored charge of unresolved pain, fear, or grief begins to dissolve, something that many people don't expect often happens. The physical pain begins to shift also. I want to offer a reframe that many of my clients find both challenging and liberating. What if the body's symptoms, at least some of them, are not simply malfunctions to be corrected? What if they are signals? The nervous system's way of communicating that something unresolved is being held. This is not a comfortable idea for everyone, and I want to be clear. I'm not saying that the physical symptoms are imaginary, or that illness is the person's fault, or that all symptoms have a purely emotional origin. That is not what the research suggests, and it is not what I see in my work. Chronic illness is complex. There are physical, biological, and environmental dimensions that matter enormously and deserve proper medical attention. But the emotional dimension, the unresolved fear, grief, shame, and trauma that the nervous system is holding is also real, and it is a dimension that conventional medicine almost never addresses. When we begin to work with that dimension, when the body's signals are received and the stored charges begin to dissolve, people often find that their physical symptoms become more responsive to treatment. That interventions which previously produced little effect begin to gain traction. Not because the emotional work fixed everything, but because the nervous system finally has the capacity to do what it has always been trying to do: heal. Let's talk about what resolving emotional pain can do for the body. When we work with the subconscious mind to neutralize the stored emotional charge of unresolved fear, grief, or trauma, several things tend to happen. The first is a shift in the baseline state of the nervous system, the chronic background activation, the low-level fear or tension that has been running in the background of daily life begins to quiet. As it does, the body's physiology begins to shift. The stress hormone burden decreases. The inflammatory posture of the immune system begins to normalize. Sleep deepens. Digestion stabilizes. The autonomic nervous system finds greater flexibility. The second is a shift in pain. Not always immediately, not always completely, but for many people, as the emotional charge beneath the pain is dissolved, the pain itself, its intensity, its frequency, its grip, begins to change. And the third, perhaps the most profound, is a shift in the relationship to the body itself. People who have spent years fighting their bodies, fearing their symptoms, bracing for the next flare, often find that something softens. The body begins to feel less like an enemy and more like something that has been trying, in the only language available to it, to communicate something very important. And when that communication is finally received and responded to, something settles in the nervous system, in the body, and in the person's experience of being alive in their own body. If you have been living with chronic illness or chronic pain and have never fully explored the emotional dimension of your experience, today's episode is an invitation. Not to dismiss the physical, not to accept the idea that your illness is somehow your fault, but to consider the possibility that there is a layer of your health picture that has been waiting for attention. The unresolved fear, the grief that never had the space to move, the emotional pain that learned long ago to speak in the only language left available, the language of the body. That language can be translated. Those stored charges can be dissolved, and when they are, the body often responds in ways that surprise even people who have been ill for a very long time. In our next episode, we're going to explore something that many people find both fascinating and deeply relevant. What happens when trauma is hidden? When the nervous system is clearly carrying something that the conscious mind has no access to, including birth trauma, inherited trauma, and the kinds of early experience that leave a mark before memory begins. If you would like to learn more about this work, please visit tcneuralretraining.com. Schedule a free consultation by phone or take our free quiz to see if neural retraining might be right for you. If this episode resonated with you, please follow the podcast, give it a positive rating, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Thanks for listening. Content of this podcast copyright 2026 by Twin Cities Neural Retraining. Music by Barbara Ben.